Hey crafty friends, this is Jenny from crafttestimonies.com, and today we're going to have a review and a demo of Resin Obsession casting resin. Now, this is called super clear resin, and it's used for basically two main purposes. One is to cast into molds to make shapes, and the other is to lay on top to create a glass-like effect. So for this review, I'm reviewing the two-part epoxy resin, and I'm also using the clear tints and the opaque tints in some of the things that I'm doing. Now, for those of you who have never used resin before, it can be really, really scary because there's mixing involved. It's a little bit of like chemistry action going on. This particular resin, you have two parts, a part A and a part B. So the part A, you use twice as much as the part B. So that's why the bottles are not exactly the same size. So there's that. But I also want to show you that you can get clear effects, but you can add those tints to make faux effects like amber or gemstones, or you could add inclusions like the gold flakes that you saw right away. But in any event, it's actually not as scary as you think as long as you follow the directions and you take a few precautions. So you want to make sure that your area is well ventilated. You want to make sure that you're wearing gloves. It can be a little sticky. And just so you know, this does take like a mineral spirit baby oil cleanup. This is not a water soluble product, and it's not something that I would use with small children. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to mix some stuff up. So here's this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two parts of my resin A, and I know from my own experience that if I fill up this little measuring cup to the top, that's 2 teaspoons. It's slow moving, so I got to give it a minute. I'm also going to give you a little pro tip here too. If you're mixing resin and you want to use a craft stick or a tongue depressor, it can actually add bubbles into your project, because as the resin goes into the wood, it pushes out the oxygen. So use a little plastic spatula. Works better. All right, so there's my measurements. And then the next thing I'm going to do is mix it up in a little dish. I use plastic bowls that I'm recycling. My dog likes a particular kind of dog food, so I use those dishes. And now what I'm going to do is do a little scoopy doop. Scoopy doop doop. And a little poury pour. So the next part's kind of boring. It's stirring. And so you want to stir this up and really mix everything well. And the instructions say 2 minutes. Follow that. I find that it kind of gets a little thicker and a little cloudier initially, but then as I continue stirring and it gets close to being ready to pour, it actually clears back up and that cloudiness kind of goes away. Now, the interesting thing about resin is it also creates a heat. As the chemical reaction is happening, it's going to get warm. It's not going to happen right now when you're stirring it, but later on as it cures, it's just something to be aware of, that it will create some heat. And it does take, by the way, I think a good 12 hours for it to set up, and you want to leave it 24 hours for a full cure. So it's one of those projects that this is going to take some time. You're not going to, this is not a wham bam, thank you ma'am craft. It's also, by the way, a good tip once you've done mixing just to let it rest or sit for 5 to 7 minutes. A lot of the bubbles that you create while stirring will actually rise up to the top and kind of pop on their own. If they don't, you can use like a barbecue torch to just pull those bubbles out. But as what you can see I'm doing right here is I've actually added some resin to this bezel, and now I've put an item inside. This is like the most secure kind of glue that you can do. It adds a nice shiny coat to it, but you can also embed things in the resin, and once they're in there, they are not coming out. So this is why resin is so cool, because after it sets up, it's pretty much impervious. Unlike polymer clay, which can still react to like heat. If you get it hot, it'll move or change. Resin stays put forever. All right, now in this next clip, you're going to see me adding things to that same batch of resin. This is still the same stuff, so it's been sitting now for like maybe 15 minutes on the table. It has not started to set up. You've got lots of time to work. So I've added some glitter to this particular batch. And now I'm going to add a few drops of the translucent tinting medium. Now, if you look around, there are a lot of different products you can use to tint resin. I'm not going to get into that here because I'm using the suite of products from Resin Obsession. But if you're supposed to add actually the tint to one of the parts and mix it there first. I was lazy and impulsive, so I just add it to my finished product, but it did turn out just fine. But you're going to be able to get like some swirl effects, and of course you've got that cool glitter. Now the cool thing about the translucent tint means that you can actually see the glitter inside as well as the tint. So I'm kind of making a green color here, and you'll see very quickly what the finished product is. But I just want to tell you that it is so much fun to mix things into your resin. And once they're in there, they are encapsulated for good. So you can put in things like glitter, sequins, beads, charms. You can even put in sprinkles, dried flowers. Really, there are so many cool ideas for this that that's almost reason enough alone to play with resin, just because you can put special things in. I have to admit, my daughter asked me to cast one of her baby teeth into a pendant that she could wear, and I did because, sometimes we're a little strange. So, anyways, I'm using molds, and I just want to talk about molds here real quick. I am using commercially bought molds here on my table. The green ones are from Polyform. They're actually Sculpey polymer clay molds, but they work great. The one that you see over on the right hand side that's orange, that one is meant for hot glue molds. But again, they work fine. You can even use the molds that you find in the cake decorating aisle. All of those are safe to use with resin, mostly because, as I mentioned before, resin creates heat when it cures. Silicone molds are usually safe up to like 400 degrees.
So I'm just pointing out you can use different kinds of molds. Interesting thing about these Sculpey molds is that they have a different texture. So notice, let me see here if I can get a little before and after. This leaves like a matte surface because of the way the mold is made, whereas these are shiny, these leave a shiny surface. So one of the things you should pay attention to as well. For example, here's the perfect example. Okay, this is the same resin. This is my faux amber resin. When I poured it in the molds, they're upside down. They look like this. I got them out. Notice how this one is matte finish because of the mold, whereas this one is shiny finish because of the mold. So this is what I was working on yesterday. I was tinting. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Woo! That's awesome. All right. Sorry, guys, just got excited because what I wanted to do was create a resin that looked a little bit like lapis. And what I did was I used some two different kinds of resin, and then I added some additive at the very end. I did not want it to be all mixy, and I like the way it turned out. I got some little gold flakes in there, and I got some white, and I got some blue. Yay! Yay! So this is another reason why I highly encourage you to experiment. Now, I'm showing you, I'm just popping these out. The nice thing about silicone molds is you just literally pop them out. Here's my gold leaf flake. That's going to be great on a piece. Let me bring it closer. Can you see it?
So I also just want to let you know that you can paint on your finished resin. I wanted to show you these ones that I cast in black from an original mold using Amazing Mold Putty. There's the original and there's my copy. And then I painted it with some Krylon gold leafing pen. But that's one of the cool things about the resin is that if the mold is homemade or matte, it will also take paint. So you can add another layer on top. So here's my little Buddha. Here he is, all gold leafed up. I also made a black one and an orange one. And now I'm going to show you what he looks like when I added a little bit of black wash on top just to make those details kind of pop out. Okay, so this is another use for resin. If you're wondering why would I try this product out? Well, the reason why is because it'll add a glossy top coat for just about anything. Now, I recommend it for flat surfaces. This isn't a doming product. It's a thinner formula. Resin Obsession's a thinner formula. But I found that if I applied it gently with a paintbrush, I could create a top coat effect. So one of those kind of matte pieces of amber, I added a top coat, so it became a shiny piece of amber. This is also great if you want to add a little bit of resin, oh, say to some paper, and it goes all translucent, and then you can cut it. It becomes something more than just paper. But I'll do a separate video on that if anybody is interested. Just leave me a comment below and I'll make sure to add, a follow-up video on that. But it's just a nice way of adding a nice glossy top coat, seals everything in, and makes it impervious. All right, so this last little clip, I'm just kind of showing you an overview of all the things I made with Resin Obsession, including that green with the gold sparkles. You see how they actually kind of settle to the bottom, but I created pendants, bezels. I use it as a glue. It's just a very easy resin to use. The only thing you have to get over is that you mix 2 to 1. The one thing you cannot use this particular resin for is doming. It does not want to create like that nice domed bezel effect for the top of something. There are other resins for that. So I hope you enjoyed this overview and demo of Resin Obsession. You got some ideas and maybe you're inspired now to try it out and try something new. Thanks so much for watching and have a crafty day.